Let's get the intro. Welcome, everybody. Today is going to be a very serious episode. It's more educational than anything else. So today is going to be very educational because it is February. And what else is February other than Black History Month? If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I might hate this, but I'm not wrong. It's been like that forever, right? Well, not forever. It's been like that for quite a while. But since it is that Black History Month, and in honor of my roots, which I don't have the DNA results, I just know it because I was told it by my mom, who did do the DNA test. So it is going to be the episode that I did a while back over Afro-Mexicans or Afro-Latinos. So we're going to be doing that. It's a rehashed episode. I took my old script and I condensed it down to something a little bit better. We're not better, but more to what we're doing today, right? So someone's in my chat. Stream my labs. So without further ado, let's get started. Where did it go? My script disappeared. There it is. What if I told you that a foundational chapter of Mexico's history has been almost completely erased? A chapter where for a time, the African presence was so large, it rivaled the European one. Think about the images that come to mind when you hear the word Mexico. You probably picture ancient pyramids, vibrant fiestas, maybe the iconic art of Frida Kahlo. But do you picture this, the African heritage, or anything that's related to it? Spain brought over 200,000 enslaved Africans to forge its new world, a massive number, especially when you consider only about 120,000 Spaniards had arrived by the early 1600s. Yet their triumph have been systematically forgotten. I'm here to uncover this forgotten chapter to find the ghosts of those who were erased and meet the descendants who are fighting to be seen. So in other words, family like mine, family like others that have African roots. Like I said, there are test results, and I got to find mine so I can get mine done. But it is part of my heritage. It's also part of like 90% of Latinos' heritage. To a certain degree, it just depends on how far. This is a quest to understand how an entire people can be written out of a nation's history, and it starts with a catastrophe. Before the first African foot was forced onto Mexican soil, the land was home to millions. Hernan Cortez arrived in 1519. The indigenous population of central Mexico was somewhere between 4 and 25 million people. Just a century later, that number had collapsed by up to 90%, and this wasn't just a consequence of war. The most lethal weapon of the Spanish conquest was invisible: disease. 19 major epidemics swept through the land in the first century of colonial rule. Smallpox, measles, and typhus were devastating, but the indigenous population also faced mysterious and terrifying illness they called cocolitzue, the Nahuatl word for pestilence. Cocolitzue was a brutal hemorrhagic fever causing high fevers and bleeding from the nose, mouth, and eyes, with death often coming in just a few days. The two largest outbreaks in 1545 and 1576 were apocalyptic. The first killed up to 80% of the native population, a demographic disaster that rivaled the Black Death in Europe. The second killed half of those who remained. These outbreaks were made even worse by extreme droughts, creating a perfect storm of death and despair. As millions perished, the Spanish saw their most valuable resources disappearing. Their colonial project, the silver mines, the sugar plantations, the massive haciendas, was built on forced labor. They had created a brutal system called the encomienda. In theory, it was a grant entrusting indigenous souls to a Spaniard who was supposed to protect and convert them to Christianity. In practice, it was a license for slavery, a system rife with torture, overwork, and abuse that only sped up the population collapse. With their indigenous workforce wiped out, the Spanish Empire turned its eyes across the Atlantic. They needed a new source of labor, one they deemed more resilient. Their solution was the mass importation of enslaved Africans, a decision that would forever change the destiny of Mexico. This demand for labor kicked off a horrifying new economy. Between 1521 and 1640, ships carrying human cargo became a constant, grim presence in the port of Veracruz. Over 200,000 enslaved Africans were forcibly brought to Mexico during the colonial period. Early on, the Spanish prized men from the regions of Guinea, Bissau, and Senegal. Later, the trade shifted, bringing thousands from Angola and the Congo. These men and a smaller number of women became the engine of the new Spain. They were sent to silver mines in Zacatecas and Guanajuato, fueling the wealth that made the Spanish Empire one of the richest in the world. They toiled on the sweltering sugar plantations of Veracruz and Morelos, often used as foremen to oversee the remaining indigenous laborers under the racist belief that one African could do the work of 4 indigenous people. They were everywhere. They were artisans in the city, cowboys on the vast haciendas, and domestic servants in the house of the elite. By the early 17th century, the African population of Mexico, both enslaved and freed, had grown so large that in many areas it rivaled or surpassed the numbers of European Spaniards. And yet, if you open a standard Mexican history book, you will find barely a mention of them. But it's a massive mistake to only see them as laborers. Because wherever you find oppression, you will find resistance. And in the mountains of Veracruz, one man's defiance would lead to the founding of the first free black town in all of the Americas. So during the colonization of Mexico by the Spaniard, I cleaned this episode up a little bit. So a lot of that what was happening is that they were running out of people because of pestilence, because of disease, because of everything that they were bringing in, that they were like, we need more. And like I said last time I recorded this, people should never be seen as a resource. I don't care what's going on in the world. I don't care what, even with today's political climate, I don't give a rat's ass. People as a resource is one of the things that pisses me off. And last time I recorded this, I got very, very, not emotional, but kind of agitated and into it. Like, it riled me up a little bit because it's one of the most messed up things that I've ever read. And the reason I first started this script when I first did this episode was because there was a content creator on TikTok. They were African and they were downplaying the whole situation with Mexicans and Africans. And it really got under my skin. And I was at work one day and I wrote out a 2-page script in less than 2 hours. This was when I was working at when I was working at a desk, and I pulled up, I had both my screens, all 3 of my screens actually, filled up with everything. I'm talking about everything, with history facts, census reports, everything. So they still do have an issue. I'm reading a chat. I'm also streaming somewhere else too. They still do have an issue with chocolate. There's actually a shortage right now in the world, that there is a chocolate shortage and a potential for it to go extinct. That's a whole nother thing too. Yeah, they still have it. Yeah, chocolate is a finite resource that could potentially run out. Even with everyone who's always like, oh, you got to find practical ways to farm it, ethical resourcing and all that crap. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. With harvesting and plants and things like that, you can have the most ethical way of processing everything. Good night. You could have the most, yes, it's because they overproduce it. You could have everything done perfectly, but at the rate that we consume it, we are running out faster than people realize. So yes, especially for Valentine's Day, which is coming up soon, which this episode will be out before the end of the week. I'm going to post this one tomorrow instead of the one last week. I'm switching that one over for the week after. But yeah, so it's just one of those things. And like I said, like I was saying before I got into the whole production thing of it, people as a resource should never be seen. The fact that the Spanish at one point thought of the indigenous of Mexico, my people, Africans, anybody, right, as the new engine to their new world is the most messed up thing I can think of. I want to cuss. I'm trying not to cuss because I want this video to go everywhere, especially YouTube. And I know they kind of frown down upon that. So I'm going to try my hardest not to get too emotionally involved with this one and cuss. But y'all know me. When I start streaming, when I start reading some of these more heavier episodes, I do get a little more intense. So I am sorry ahead of time if I cuss a lot. If I do anything else, I'm trying to just pull back a bit and get this episode everywhere. So, but yeah, it's just one of those things that really bothers me. And that's part of the things that it could have been the content creator that just really got under my skin. And recently her content popped up again and it was that same video. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to respond to this one and I'm going to make my own. So, but yeah. So let's get going back to the episode. back to where we were, the first town in all of the Americas. His name was Gaspar Yanga. According to legend, he was a prince, a member of a royal family from present-day Guinea. Before he was captured and shipped to Veracruz to work on a sugarcane plantation, but Yanga was not a man born for bondage. Around 1570, he led a daring escape, taking a group of followers with him into the treacherous highlands near the Pico de Orizaba. There they established a palinque, a fortified community of escaped slaves, which today we call Maroon. We call a Maroon community. For nearly 40 years, Yanga and his people lived as a free society. They built homes, raised family, grew their own food, and armed themselves. They became a symbol of defiance, raiding Spanish caravans for supplies and weapons and inspiring other enslaved people to follow their lead. Their very existence was an intolerable challenge to Spanish authority. By 1609, the Spanish crown had enough. They sent a heavily armed force of around 500 soldiers to crush the rebellion. But Yanga and his fighters, who knew the terrain like the back of their hands, fought back with fierce ingenuity. The Spanish were ambushed, outmaneuvered, and forced into a bloody stalemate. What happened next was unprecedented. Unable to defeat them, the Spanish viceroy was forced to negotiate. Yanga, the formerly enslaved man, negotiated a peace treaty with the Spanish Empire. The negotiations were tense, but in 1618 the terms were made official. The community will be granted its freedom and recognized as a self-governing town called San Lorenzo de los Negros. So St. Lawrence of the Black people was the name of the town, San Lorenzo de los Negros. In a bitter compromise, Yanga agreed to help repel any new runaways to secure the freedom. His people had already won. So this was a free town, but part of their thing to be free is that they couldn't accept new slaves. So if there was someone that was running away, they couldn't come to them. It sounds cruel, but he was thinking of the many instead of the few. He was thinking of the community he already built. So it's kind of fucked up. I'm trying not to cuss. It was kind of messed up because he's trying to protect what he already has. As much as he would want to bring in more people, he can't at this point. This town, known today as the municipality of Yanga, became the first legally recognized free black town in the Americas, established years before the Pilgrims even landed at Plymouth Rock. Yanga wasn't just a rebel, he was a founder, a statesman, a figure now known as the first liberator of the Americas. And he wasn't the only Afro-descendant who would rise to shape the nation's destiny. The fact that a story this powerful, let's get back to the story. Always got to do a little call to action there in the middle, right? A century after Yanga's triumph, another man of African descent would rise to the highest office in the land. His name was Vicente Guerrero, and he would become the second president of Mexico. Born to an Afro-Mexican father and an indigenous mother, Guerrero was a brilliant general in Mexico's War of Independence. He was a man of the people, a fierce liberal who championed the cause of the poor and marginalized to the aristocrats. Oh my God, I can't this word. I've said it many times. Let's mark this because I'm going to delete this section in a second. Back to the point here. Oh my, I can't do it. Whoa, my brain's not working. Hold on. Aristocracy. Aristocracy. Jesus. Oh, that was bad. My word. My brain just stopped completely. Aristocracy. The wealthy Spanish descended elite. He was a threat. They derisively called him El Negro Guerrero, and his visibly mixed race heritage was a source of racist scorn. But in 1829, Guerrero became president on September 16th, Mexico's Independence Day. He issued the most famous decree, the nationwide abolition of slavery. It was a radical act of justice delivered 34 years before Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in the United States. I saw the word snack and I wanted to say United Snakes. That's my fault. Proclamation in the United States. The decree made Mexico a beacon of freedom, attracting enslaved people who escaped from the American South to find refuge. Hey, what's going on anyway? Welcome to the stream. I'm also doing a multi-stream somewhere else, Twitch, YouTube, not Instagram. I used to do Instagram, but that takes too long. This will be edited out later. I'm doing an educational podcast. So if you want to learn something about African Mexican heritage, this is the place to be. And my voice does change when I do my podcast. Back to where I was. But Guerrero's presidency was short-lived. His progressive policies and his very identity enraged the conservatives. Just months after his decree, he was betrayed, deposed in a coup, and executed. The execution of Guerrero was more than a political murder. It was symbolic of what was to come. In the decades that followed, as Mexico struggled to forge its identity, it began to build new national story. The story was called Mestizos, or mestizaje, which is mestizo, actually. Yeah, is the idea that Mexico is a nation born from the fusion of two people, the Spanish and the Indigenous. Yeah, a mestizo is a blend of Mexican Indigenous and Spanish. That's a mestizo. So every Mexican is a mestizo born, but there's very few true Indigenous Mexicans. I have a lot of characteristics. I need to go do a DNA result test to see exactly how far, because this big nose of mine, y'all can't see it on the Irium stream, but this big nose of mine, my beard, the way it grows, these are features of Indigenous Mexicans, because you could see if you look close enough, it's not really fully there the way it should be, but it grows in decently. That's because of the heritage in my system. It doesn't grow technically right, but I like it, so I don't care. Bite me. That's my solution. Back to it. It celebrates the mestizo, the mixed race individuals, as the quintessential Mexican. On the surface, this sounds inclusive, but it's a story with a deliberate omission. The third root, the African root, was systematically written out in an effort to create a unified, homogeneous national identity. Post revolutionary governments promoted an idealized image of the mestizo that had no room for blackness. Afro-Mexican culture was either ignored or its contributions were plagiarized and rebranded as simply Mexican. This erasure was so complete that the category of black or Afro-descendant was removed from the national census for nearly 2 centuries. You can't count a people you pretend doesn't exist. And they did eventually bring it back. For generations, Afro-Mexicans lived in a state of invisibility, often in marginalized communities like the Costa Chica regions of Guerrero and Oaxaca. They were Mexicans, but the official story of Mexico had no place for them. Children were taught in school that their country was born from the Spanish and the Indigenous, a lesson that directly contradicted the faces in their own families. Many were made to feel like foreigners in their own land, their identity constantly questioned. Buried isn't the same as a story that's ended. Activist scholars and community leaders have powerful movement of Afro-Mexican activists, scholars, and community leaders have fought to reclaim their place in the nation's history. They fought for recognition, for resources, and for the simple right to be counted. Their fight led to a historic victory after decades of activism. A 2015 interim census included a question about African ancestry for the first time since the colonial era. The results were a revelation. 1.38 million people identified as Afro-Mexican. So 1.38 million people identified as African American. Just think about that. Almost 1.5 million people were just ignored. To the government, to everyone, for decades, for years, hundreds of years, they were just ignored. They didn't exist. Do you know how messed up that is, that to your people not to exist? But through fighting and everything, this is part of the reason why I always watch on Instagram. I will watch whenever the Mexican president does her speeches. Like every other day she holds a conference. It's amazing. She holds a lot of conferences. She's always talking to the people. She's always out with the people. That's why you will hear me call her like my president, because Claudia Sheinbaum is fucking amazing. Mexico is very progressive nowadays, because back in the day, even I'm a little bit older than most people that stream. on here on Irium and places like that. I know there's a few other streamers my age, but whatever. I'm not getting into that whole age thing. But growing up, I've seen it all. I've seen the 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 inclusion and the separation of it all in Mexico and in the States, because I live in Texas, the deep South. You know what I mean? So I've seen it all, especially in like Mexico. It's people are seen different. People are always seen different. Like me, I am 5'11". I'm a wide chested guy. I'm not a small guy. I'm a big guy. I have tattoos on my chest. I have tattoos on my arms. I don't have many, but I do have small. And my tattoos are not threatening. I have cartoon characters tattooed on me, right? But me being as big as I am and as tall as I am, they see my tattoos in Mexico and they cross the street. They're like, that guy's dangerous. Not nowadays. It's more accepted, but it's still kind of, the older generations are like, es pandillero. He's in a gang. No, it's a cartoon character. I got Courage the Cowardly Dog on the back of my arm. I got a Pokemon on my chest. How am I in a gang? What am I? What am I? Gotta catch 'em all? Is that my gang? What? Am I running from danger with Courage the Cowardly Dog? Like what? No, I'm not in a gang. I'm 5'11". Just because I'm big doesn't mean I'm scary. And I do look intimidating. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a big guy. But another thing is too, I have long hair. Up until recently, my hair was actually down on my lower back because I donated it to cancer organizations. But in Mexico, I was seen as like, that guy es medio acá, right? He's a little fruity, right? He likes it from the other side, right? No, what? No, I just have long hair. What are you talking about? I have but it's things like that. Like it's not hidden discretions in Mexico. In Mexico, they're like, that guy likes other things. You know what? I'm like, wait a minute, wait, what are you talking about? I like other, like, no, I have kids. What are you talking about? You know, but that's those things in Mexico. I've seen it all. And you see the racism too. There's certain words that they call African Americans. I will not repeat them. I know them all, and I'm not going to lie. Growing up, I've said them all because I was just a dumb kid, right? Everyone says stupid things when they're growing up. And now I'm like, wait a minute, I gotta tighten up so I don't say all those words anymore at all because I'm not that guy. This is why my personal motto is I hate everyone equally. You know what that means? That means to me, everyone is the same. If I'm going to cuss you out, I'm going to cuss you out. I don't care. But that's also my way of respecting everybody. I will say the same thing to your face, to your face, to your face. I will say it all. That's right. Yeah. And in Mexico, they are short. They're fucking short. I'm not going to lie. My dad's shorter than me. He's way shorter than me. That's a whole another story. The height thing. Like I said, that's why I mention my height a lot when I talk about Mexico, because I stand above everyone else. I'm a tall dude over there. Over here, I'm average height. Over there, man, if you ever want to feel, if you think you're short and you ever want to feel tall, go to Mexico. Go visit Mexico. If you're above 5'5" and you feel short, go there. Feel tall for a couple days. You'll love it. Anyways, back to the story. I got on my sidetrack there. Just 5 years later, in the official 2020 census, that number nearly doubled to 2.5 million people, or 2% of the country's total population, proudly claimed their African heritage. Today, the third root is breaking through the concrete of erasure. You can find it in the states of Guerrero, Oaxaca, and Veracruz, which have the highest concentrations of Afro descendants. You can hear it in the rhythms of son jarocho music, with its undeniable African influence. You can see it in the faces of the people who for centuries were told they didn't belong, but who are now proudly standing up and declaring, we are here, we exist, we are African, we are Mexican, we are Afro-Mexicans. The story of Afro-Mexico is a story of brutal exploitation and incredible resilience. It shows how a nation can be built on the backs of a people while simultaneously writing them out of its own biography. From the unspeakable tragedy that created the demand for their labor, to the defiant courage of Gaspar Yanga, to the revolutionary justice of Vicente Guerrero, to the long, painful silence that followed, the African chapter of Mexico's history is not a footnote. It is a foundational text. What this all shows us is that history isn't just something that happened. It's something that is actively remembered or actively forgotten. For 2 centuries, this history was forgotten, but now it's being remembered. The 2.5 million people who claimed their African heritage on the last census are the living, breathing proof that you can't erase people forever. The question we're left with is, what other forgotten chapters of our own history are waiting to be rediscovered? And who gets to decide which stories get told? Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please share it. The more people who know this history, the harder it becomes to ever erase again. And thank you for watching, everybody. Especially you people on stream, especially you on Irium. That are always wonderful. YouTube, Twitch, everywhere I stream. Please do not let this history be forgotten. This is a very important history. This is as important, if not more important, than my episode of my hometown, the Allende Massacre. This is more important than anything else, right? Because this is about an entire group of people that were ignored for so long that are now being brought to light. Like, what did I say? 2020? That was what, 6 years ago? I gotta look through my own thing. Yeah, 2020. So just from the 1600s to 2020 was how long people were used, abused, forgotten, and then remembered. Just think about how long that was, that it took for Mexico, for the US, for every country that ever had something like this happen to rectify the change, to rectify a wrong, to fix things. And there's things that are still not fixed. It's not, they didn't just come out and be like, okay, it's done, you're back on the census. Yeah, that's part of what they wanted, but they want their history back. There's another episode that I did that was just as impactful, and it's the Forgotten War. That one was a political thing. I will get into that one another day. I think I'll rehash that one up too. And I might do another episode of the Allende Massacre. So yeah, thank you for watching, everybody. And remember, as always, stay spooky, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.